67 people would be alive today if they had done their job.
Remember, they work for you. Right? That's really important. They work for you.
No matter how safe a system is, it can be safer.
That day changed the way people in the United States live.
This is the Captain and Kennedy Air Show. I'm Captain Steve.
And I'm Kennedy Steve.
All right, there's so much been going on recently. We're going to talk about a lot of things in this podcast today, Steve, but we want to talk about that seaplane crash, not on the Hudson, but on the East River. That's a distinction between the two. The preliminary reports out on the Butler, Missouri skydiving crash with 12 fatalities in that one. There was an airplane, a 737, went missing off the coast of Pakistan not too long ago. And there's details now about that. And then we're going to land this thing today talking about 18 months away from the DCA crash that happened last January. We've got a fascinating interview, very intimate interview with the parents of First Officer Sam Lilley. He was the first officer on that crash on that night, January 29th, 2025. They're here in studio with me, and we had just a wonderful in-depth interview. So hang on for that. We'll have that at the end. But I want to start out with this seaplane crash on the East River. You're from New York.
Yes.
All right. There's a difference between the Hudson and the East River.
Right. And all of that seaplane traffic for those rich people that don't want to sit in traffic on the LIE and go back and forth to the Hamptons all summer, all of that originates or ends on the 23rd Street on the Lower East Side, where you have a seaplane base. So those, little airplanes take off, land in the Lower East River. Off to the Hamptons they go multiple times a day.
Okay, so they're taking rich people back to their homes and because I knew that there was like helicopter tours, and I'm supposing you could take a seaplane tour as well, or are they're going someplace?
Yeah, they're mainly itinerant. Yeah. They're leaving from the Lower East Side and going basically up the East River under the LaGuardia CBA or through the LaGuardia CBA out over the Long Island Sound out to the Hamptons.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at this video. I want you to watch it with me, and our audience is going to watch it as well. Here's what happens to this seaplane on the East River. It's kind of choppy as they're trying to land, so let's watch this thing. Here they come. Looks like a nice approach profile. 1, 2, 3. Oh, and then they just kind of dig in, go over on the left side. We're going to see it again. They're going to slow down a little bit here. Nice approach, nice and smooth. Touches down there, another one, and then right about there. And I'm going to pause it right about there because I think that's where everything starts to go wrong. I think they probably hit a wave, and you can see it's a little choppy on the East River. The winds, so the story behind this particular crash, and fortunately there was no fatalities in this, just a couple of minor injuries, is that they had tried a landing the opposite direction. So I'm going to assume that maybe that was with the wind. Don't know. And then they didn't like that approach. So they turned around, came back the other way. So they did a go around, came back the opposite direction. Maybe this time it's into the wind. I don't know. Maybe they're going to have better luck, and they don't have better luck this time coming around. So they hit a wave, and the obstacles that you have on a river like that are the weather, just the winds, the current, and then you've got ferry boats all over the place making a great big wake.
Right. And especially, that weekend, because you have the tall ships on the Hudson and Fleet Week, and there's a lot of marine traffic in New York over the 4th of July weekend.
Yeah, it was a 4th of July weekend. So they've got that to contend with. And I think you hit, think about your water skiing, and all of a sudden a big boat comes by and the waves, kind of dump you. So that's what these guys are contending with. They hit the big one here and they bounce, and then they hit a second one, boom, right there. They bounce a second time. You can tell from the wake that they hit even harder that time. There's video on the inside of the airplane of somebody trying to film it, and they're doing that. And then finally the third, and this is where, boom, right there, the damage took place. So they hit a third time, they dig in, and it said that the left strut holding the wing collapsed on the airplane. I don't think this was caused because the left strut collapsed. I think the left strut collapsed because of those hard hits. And then they just kind of dig in and shut down the engines, and oops. And fortunately, if you're going to have something like that happen, you have it happen on the East River or the Hudson River, because there's lots of boats to come and get you.
Well, and especially again on that weekend, because there was an NYPD helicopter almost on top of the seaplane, because there was a Mayday call, and one of the finest, and New York's finest, which is their call sign in New York, finest 17 was on the scene in under 30 seconds. And quickly thereafter, there was an NYPD police boat there because, again, there was so much going on in the river with all the marine traffic and the security around the tall ships that,
yeah.
If you're gonna have an accident in the East River, it was a good weekend to have.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, we don't wish anybody an accident. This one, fortunately, no fatalities, just minor injuries. I did do a video and put out on this if you want to check it out, talking about all of the variables that go into landing on the water. You'd think it's easy. It's nice and smooth, right? It's not. A runway is nice and smooth, and it doesn't move. That is a moving target that they're trying to land on every time, and it's quite.
And there's a lot of current in the East River, a lot stronger current than people would think.
Yes. And so I'm surprised you don't see this more often, quite honestly, but there's one for you for the books.
There you go.
Right. Now, the other things I want to take a look at, I want to talk about Butler, Missouri, the skydiving crash, and the preliminary reports came out kind of quick. Within a couple of weeks after the accident, there were 12 fatalities in that one. And this was, if you don't recall the accident, this was the one that took Butler, Missouri. It was Skydive, Kansas, I think was the name of the company. It was number 3, the third trip of the day out of 8. They had 8 scheduled. They had 11 people in the back of the airplane, some instructors, some first-time flyers, some jumpers, I guess you'd call them. And the airplane takes off and they rotate. And shortly after rotate, you see the left wing dip and the airplane goes over about 90 degrees and just right into the ground. And it was a real head scratcher. I think everybody's natural first assumption was an engine failure, but it wasn't, was it?
No, if you read the preliminary report, engine appeared operational, unfortunately, at the time of impact. One of the things that I brought up to you, because you're the pilot guy, what do I know about flying? Right. That the preliminary report talks about a fuel imbalance when they loaded fuel after their third flight of the day. 15 gallons on one side, 45 gallons on the other.
Right.
But as you said, that.
Yeah. So that's a good point. You pointed that out because it's in the report, and it says that they loaded 15 gallons on the left side and 45 on the right. So that's the first thing you go, wait a minute, that doesn't seem right. Well, we don't know what the fuel load was in those wings up to that point, because in an airplane like this, they're going to switch between tanks, one wing and the other. So they might have already been low on the left side, or excuse me, the right side, which means that's why they put more fuel in that side. They didn't need as much in the left side to balance it out for the third trip of the day. But my understanding of this particular aircraft is even if there was a huge fuel imbalance, that wouldn't cause what we saw in the pictures and in the report. And the report leaves really more questions than answers. The big question left unanswered is, wow, okay, the engine was operating, apparently, producing thrust, they said. And so what else could have caused this? I did a short video on it talking about the difference between VMC air and torque roll, so check that out. This is not a VMC air incident, just for my pilot buddies, just to let you know. I know that's a twin engine airplane. If you lose one of the engines, you might get into something that's called VMC air, where the airplane, you run out of aileron, you run out of rudder, and the airplane just keeps going over. This has some similarities to that because they were going slow and they were heavy and they were nose up. And again, hopefully there's going to be more details on it. But this preliminary report didn't really give us a lot of insight into exactly what happened in that crash. Any other thoughts on this one?
Well, and the other thing is you had an experienced pilot. I mean, it was his second season flying with these folks, not like it was his first rodeo, unfortunately. Just a tragedy.
Yeah, I think it's just a 4,000 hours. It's the third flight of the day. He does this day after day.
Right.
And, you could make an argument, was he getting complacent? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it, but
it doesn't.
Not enough details to know.
Yeah, but even if is what you can glean from the report, I mean, there were notes. He was obviously attentive as to what was going on. And all the folks say he was detail and safety oriented.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you got to go with that. So hopefully the final report will give us more details on all that. Okay. Off the coast of Pakistan, the 737 goes missing. And every time there's an airplane that goes missing, it's like front page news. The most notorious is MH370, that Malaysian 777 that nobody's found to this day. Still missing to this day. They've found parts of it, very small parts of it.
And very few.
It's no doubt at the bottom of the ocean. There were so many crazy theories about what happened to that airplane over the years that I don't want to get into all those right now. So now this 737. So what do you know about this 737, about the airplane?
Well, the interesting thing, so pretty old 737-400. I mean, it started flying for Aeroflot in the 1990s. But this airplane had just been in Sharjah for 5 days for maintenance,
Right.
and was on a ferry flight back to Karachi.
Do you know anything about the maintenance? Just it was in for maintenance. That's it.
I have been unable to find any documentation or reporting on exactly what the maintenance was, but 5 days of maintenance in Sharjah.
Sure. Well, just for our audience to understand, these podcasts get recorded and then they have to get edited and they'll come out to you. So there may be a lot of information that comes out on this one in particular between now and when you're watching what we're talking about. We're talking about this. It just happened 2 days ago. And this is the latest information we've got. So it was some sort of maintenance. It was a ferry flight, they call it,
right,
back to Karachi. 5 people on board altogether, 2 pilots, 2 engineers. Now, I wonder if they were like flight engineers or if they were like engineers.
Don't know. Good question.
Right. And it says 1 support staff on the airplane. Fortunately, it wasn't a passenger flight. It's not unusual for airplanes to go from having a passenger life to having a freighter life.
Nope, not at all.
It takes a couple of years to retrofit the airplane with all of that. So even though this was an older airplane, from what we can find out about it up to this point, it was in good condition. But here's the flight profile. So let me take you in and show you what happened to this airplane, because this is the little bit that we do know. And I'll show you a graph here. It was K2 Airways. It's KTA 1732 is the call sign of the airplane. And it was at 35,000 feet. They were about 155 miles away from Sharjah, where they had taken off on their way to Karachi. And they had called in, the pilots called in and said that there was they were having navigation problems. Now I'm here to tell you, navigation problems don't bring an airplane down. It might get you lost, it might get you off route, but it doesn't bring an airplane down. I think clearly what we can glean from what happened to this airplane, something else was going on, and it was flight control related. It just had to be. Now, I did a video on this. It could have been pilot induced. Sometimes you have a minor issue with there's overall oscillation on the part of the pilot. We just don't know. We won't find out for a while. They're at 35,000 feet. They descend rapidly, 5,000 feet below that altitude, followed by an immediate climb of 6,000 feet right back up. At this point, however, I think they're probably losing airspeed. They're riding this bucking bronco of an airplane.
Right.
And at some point up here, they probably run out of lifties over the wings, and then the airplane goes into a stall. It would go on its back, because the last reported down here at below 5,000 feet from the ADSB, they were doing 22,000 foot per minute down. And you can't do that by pushing the airplane over. It's got to be in some sort of a spin and kind of spiraling. And that explains why it was turning to the right at the same time as well. I don't think hopefully you've never seen anything like this at Kennedy Tower.
No, never seen anything like this at Kennedy Tower, thank God.
Here's an interesting question for you. I didn't ask you this ahead of time. Were you working the night of TWA 800?
I was the ground controller for TWA 800.
Okay.
So, yeah, I was definitely working that night.
Right.
Taxied him out to the runway.
Wow.
Before he took off. And everything that happened after that accident with the FBI involvement, as well as the NTSB and all the questions, it was a pretty harrowing event, obviously. And, for me, fortunate, probably poor choice of words. Once I started doing my air safety investigation work, I went down to Langley, or actually outside of Virginia, and they have TWA 800 reconstructed in a hangar down there, and I saw it, which was a pretty jarring thing to see live.
Yeah, let's see if we can, point to my producer, let's see if we can get a picture put in of that, because it looks like Franken airplane. They put it all back together.
Absolutely. It's all put back together on a skeleton, and it was a PTSD moment for me.
Yeah, it would be. Who'd you get interviewed by?
So I was one of NATCA's air safety investigators, and the whole air safety investigator team was brought on a tour of of the NTSB facility.
Yeah.
While we were down there.
So did the FBI interview you?
Oh, after the accident?
Yeah, after the accident.
Talked to the NTSB. The FBI interview was very brief.
Yeah. What sort of questions does the NTSB have at that time?
You know, they kind of, they go through the recordings. They, and they want to know everything about the controllers working. What shift were you on? How long did you sleep? Was this a normal duty day? Anything going on in your personal life? I mean, they want to glean as much information they can about you. Though probably not germane, obviously, in this instance, but they kind of follow the same protocols anytime they interview an air traffic controller. They want to know your work week. What day of your work week are you on? How much overtime did you work? Have you gotten a normal rest pattern? Did you feel that you were, fatigued or anything like that? They want to know everything.
Did you have to do a drug test?
After the accident? Actually, I did not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the pilots, if the pilots survive it or there is an incident, they whisk you right away and you have to do a drug test. And I was wondering about the air traffic control.
So, interestingly, a lot depends on if you're the local controller they may have. As the ground controller, I don't think they do.
And so
It
the
depends
difference
on
between the local controller and the ground controller is?
Local controller would be clearing you for takeoff or clearing you to land, and the ground controller would be taxiing you. So
you guys are both working in the tower, but one's working taxiing airplanes. The other is
working flying airplanes.
Yep. Okay. Good. All right, let's take a look now. Let's go back to this missing 737. Now, they've located the airplane. I'll show you a picture here of some of the early debris that they've brought up. So it's not missing anymore, but that was a flight route. Went from Sharjah to Karachi. It was almost all the way, 155 miles or so down here. Now, you can see where this airplane is, all right? There's lots of things going on in that part of the world. So there's going to be lots of theories about what might have happened to this airplane. We don't know any of those at this point. One of the things that we do know is that the flight crew radioed in that they were having navigational problems. All right. And that's not unusual in this part of the world. I've flown over there many times in my 777, and there's jamming going on all of the time. And so you'll get little GPS warnings and other things that say your navigation is off. You've got backups to backups on those airplanes. This airplane does as well, but they reported that they were having problems.
But one of the other things, that I found was all the pilot controller communication was perfectly normal.
Yeah.
There was no indication that there was anything wrong with the airplane.
Right. Yeah.
Anything substantially wrong with the airplane.
Correct. And then whenever whatever went wrong happened, they didn't have time to keep them.
There was no more communication. Right.
There was no more communication. But I'm here to tell you, a navigation problem does not bring down an airplane. So whatever theory you're reading or watching out there on the interwebs, it's not related to an.
And as you guys always say when there's an issue, aviate, navigate, communicate. So communication's the last thing they're going to do.
Yes, absolutely right. But it looks like they're trying to hold on to this airplane for dear life. Let me show you. Let me see what. Here's a part of the airplane that's come up. That they're bringing it in over the side. Looks like a part of the wing or side of the fuselage or something. It's hard to say where that part is. And then there's this one. Everything's kind of laid out on the deck of this recovery ship, and that's not a lot. But they have located the airplane on the bottom. Hopefully, by the time you're watching this podcast, they'll have gotten the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. And as soon as there's any good information to share with you from that, I'll be in front of the camera and share that on either my channel or our channel.
Our channel. There you go. Surprisingly, though, bigger pieces for an airplane that came down like that. Yes. But 737-400s, kind of like a tank.
Yeah, it
is.
A
tank with two engines.
It's a tough airplane for sure. Been around for forever, absolutely forever. Well, that's interesting. That's fascinating about TWA 800. I want to probably pick your brain a little bit more on that somewhere down the road.
Sure.
All right. So what we really want to talk about today is it's been a year and a half since the DCA crash. When I say the DCA crash, I'm talking about American Eagle 5342. It was the CRJ, 64 people on board that aircraft, 3 on board Pat 25, a Black Hawk helicopter. They collide over the Potomac, about 30 seconds away from the airplane touching down on runway 33. They were circling to land on runway 33. And we've had a preliminary report. We've had a final report. I want to know your thoughts. What are your thoughts on the DCA crash from a year and a half?
Well, I think there has been so much reporting about the potential for collision between fixed wing and rotary aircraft around DCA. Pilot reports for years. Controllers complaining about the proximity of the helicopter routings and the normal flight paths. And, unfortunately, something has to happen before somebody takes notice, because there were numerous reports of near mid-air collisions.
Yeah.
And, from the controller perspective, I don't say that we get malaise, because that's a poor choice of words. But I know in New York, and I'll use that as the example, when we worked, the finest or NYPD helicopters, that whole team of aviators were all ex-military. They were excellent. And from the controller perspective of always trying to solve a problem and move on to your next problem, if it was an NYPD helicopter interacting with a fixed wing, once visual separation was established, that was a problem that was solved. And, conflict alerts could be going off on your radar screen, but the NYPD helicopter said he had him in sight. That conflict was solved. And in this case, the conflict wasn't solved.
Right. So the instructor pilot on Pat 2.5, I want to say 3 times either asked for or received permission for visual separation, his own visual separation.
Correct.
So that's what you're talking about when they say, hey, we're assuming our own visual separation. That means we've got the aircraft in sight, and we will avoid that aircraft. And at that point, the verbal contract between you and them is signed.
Correct.
Right. And they're going to avoid it. And you're saying the guys who fly the Pat air helicopters down there, it's not their first rodeo.
No, I mean, these are experienced pilots who do this route, do those routes around DCA all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So again, I don't want to say it's malaise,
right,
because it's not. But as you said, once they've established visual separation and that contract signed, I can move on to solve another problem, because a controller can't become myopic watching a helicopter and a fixed wing. You can't do it. You're going to sacrifice other responsibilities and other safety-related responsibilities.
Well, I think there's been lots of opinions about this, and it's no one entity's fault. It's not the tower's fault. It wasn't the airplane's fault. It wasn't Pat 2.5. It was a combination of things over the years.
Always is.
It always is. It's never just one thing. And the final report kind of laid that out, I thought, very well. Now, why in the world is the Pentagon allowing training in Class B airspace on night vision goggles that cut your vision down to this? That's again another thing that should get fixed. Talking on 2 different frequencies, right? Everybody should be listening to everybody on the same frequency. What a lot of people don't know is that regional jet never heard any of the transmissions to Pat 2.5. So they didn't even know they were coming until it was over. So there's lots of things that can do. The Rotor Act is one of the things that I think Senator Cruz initially wrote, and there's some iterations of that now. It didn't get passed, but there's another one I think called the Safe Act. I can't remember exactly what iteration it is now. It's constantly going through markups in the Senate and in the House. But hopefully once we get a finalized deal that we can come to you with, we're going to do an call to call your congressman and your senator and say, all right, let's pass this bit of legislation. It's going to make at least DCA a lot safer. And it's because my contention on DCA is that it's been a hotbed waiting to have an accident happen. It all started with the 9/11 attacks.
Sure.
DCA, if you don't remember, was the last airport to reopen in the United States. There's a reason for that. It's because every senator and congressman and staffer comes in and out of that airport, and they were scared to death that there was going to be another 9/11 style attack and it was going to involve DCA. So what they did was they took an 8-lane highway that used to go into DCA from all directions, and they turned it into a 2-lane country road that went up and down the Potomac. And if you weren't up and down the Potomac, and they stacked everybody up, right? If you didn't come in and down the Potomac, they'd shoot you out of the sky.
Absolutely.
That was the threat, right? And so, and to this day, 25 years later, that's still the way you go in and out of DCA, and there's no reason for it.
There are, you know, there are very few days in our lives or in this country that changed. That day changed the way people in the United States live. Yep. In many facets. I mean, I just, you know, Mrs. Kennedy Steve and I were driving back yesterday out of New York City. You can't take a truck on the lower level of the George Washington Bridge ever since 9/11. Yeah. And it contributes to major traffic jams in New York all the time. But all things like that, it truly changed the way we live.
So explain, why can't you take a truck on the lower level of the GWB?
They're worried about a truck being full of explosives blowing up both levels at the same time.
Yep.
It's just that simple.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Just that simple.
And even though 9/11 is 25 years old, the operations in and out of DCA are that antiquated. And I think my push, and if I can get my voice in on this, is we need to open up that highway a little bit more and stop stacking everybody up going into DCA. It's not safe. And so the very senators and congressmen that wanted to have a safer operation, fearful that somehow the airplane was going to get hijacked. And by the way, hijackers don't follow the rules.
Right.
Okay. So you can make rules. Follow me on this, folks. Right. The fear was there'd be a hijacking. What they ended up was replacing one for another, which was the stacking everybody up. And that was a ticking time bomb. And it happened last year. So having said that, we've got a very special interview, and I haven't met them in person. I met Tim and Sheri Lilley via text at first, and then email, and then over the phone. Lovely people. Tim is the father of Samuel Lilley. Sheri is the stepmother of Samuel Lilley. Samuel Lilley was the first officer, the FO, on Flight 5342 that night into DCA. He perished on that airplane along with everybody else. And she's got just they both have an absolutely wonderful story, not just to tell about him, but also their activism now in the last 18 months to try to get the airspace in the DCA improved and safer and around the country. They're absolutely wonderful people. I did an intimate interview with them just recently. So, Steve, I think it would be appropriate for us to cut to that interview and see and hear directly from Tim and Sheri Lilley. All right, joining us in the studio today is Tim and Sheri Lilley. They are the parents of Samuel Lilley, or I should say First Officer Samuel Lilley. Samuel was one of the two people at the controls that night of PSA Flight 5342, January 29th, 2025, about a minute away from touching down on runway 33 at DCA when they collided with a Black Hawk helicopter. 64 people on the airplane perished, another 3 on the helicopter, and the rest is history. We all know about that story. So, guys, thanks so much for joining us here in the studio.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah,
Thanks for giving us the opportunity to have a voice and to keep Sam's memory alive.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to do so. And I never did meet your son. I kind of wish I had. There's one of the questions you get asked is, hey, do you know so-and-so in the airlines? And I never got to meet him, but he sounds like a wonderful guy. Tell us Sam's story. I want to get to know him. I want our audience to get to know him. From the time he was a young guy, did he grow up wanting to be a pilot, or what? Take us on that journey?
So no, he did not.
Okay.
Sam was a great kid, but he struggled with a lot of things, and he pretty much partied his way. He was a frat boy, and he partied his way through college as a marketing major. Yep. And when he graduated college, he went to work for a bottler in Atlanta. And he wasn't there maybe 3 weeks when he called me and said, Dad, this marketing is not for me. Right. What I've decided, I wanted to be an airline pilot. And I was very overjoyed, but also I said, you knucklehead, why didn't we have this conversation 4 years ago? And you could, be 3/4 of the way there by now.
Yeah.
And so once, as a child, he kind of, his idea of what he wanted to be switched a lot, which is different than me. I wanted to be a pilot since I was like 10. But when he finally decided that he wanted to be a pilot and he focused on that, he really was able to do it in a way where he did it quickly and he did it professionally, and he was way better at it than I even thought he was going to be. And so I was very proud. I was very happy that he had made that change, and it was a great choice for him.
Right.
I was very proud of him because I felt like all through lower school into college, he was satisfied with being an average-ish student. And then he got into flight school and he discovered he could do some pretty difficult things. He started challenging himself. And, you know, one of the concerns that when we kind of wring our hands and say, this generation, there are a lot of kids that are being propped up that their self-esteem is not based on achievements. Sam earned every bit of his self-esteem. And probably within the last 7 years of his life, he was really proving to himself that he had potential he never realized he had. And he was beginning to realize it. It was beautiful to witness it.
He was doing what he loved.
Right.
He loved it. As his younger brother said a couple of times, I've only seen Sam as passionate about two things, his fiancée Lydia and aviation.
Wow, that's great. So where did he start his aviation journey? Now we know where it ended, but where did it start?
He went to a school called ATP Flight School, and he went in Daytona Beach, and he went through it fairly quickly. Even COVID slowed it down for a few months, but he went through fairly quickly, and then he was a CFI there for just a few months, and he took a job as an aerial survey pilot so he could build time very, very quickly.
Right.
Because his goal was to get to the airlines as quick as he could.
Okay, so what does an aero survey pilot do?
So he flew in small Cessnas, and he flew tracks back and forth, and he had some sophisticated camera equipment that was run by a GPS that would take photographs, and it was used for mapping and for, I think a lot of insurance companies use that data and such like that.
Okay, well, that's great. So if you're looking for a job in aviation, there's lots of ways to build your hours,
right?
And one of his approaches was, I don't want to have to land. I want to stay up here as long as I can and get, you know, my assigned sectors where I'm flying completed. So he would almost dehydrate himself so he wouldn't have to land and go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was hardcore.
That's dedication. I totally get that.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your favorite memory of Samuel?
Oh, I have so many great memories. You know, I remember more as a child, right? And the things that would do, you know, we always in our family had a hard time getting up and getting ready to get to church on time. And then we'd be, okay, we're ready to go. Where's Sam? Where's Sam? And we'd all be looking for him, and we'd come out and he'd be sitting in the car all ready to go. And he'd been sitting out there for 5 or 10 minutes, you know? What do you have?
We're a blended family. And so when Tim and I got married, he had some preconceived notions about some things like leftovers. When we would eat at a restaurant and bring leftovers home, he thought these are going to end up in the trash can. That's a Jim Gaffigan bit anyway, right? Yeah. Can I bring you a box? Sure, I'll throw these home. Throw these away at home later. Yeah. So we had eaten Thai food, and I had gotten some curry, and I brought it home. Well, when I got home the next day, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I have this curry left. I'm going to go eat it. Well, it was gone. Tim had eaten it. And I said, what in the world? I eat my leftovers. What were you thinking? And Sam jumped to my defense and said, yeah, Dad, Sheri brought that home. She had dibs on it. So you had to let her choose first. And Tim was kind of taken aback. He was like, oh, I see this is how it's going to be. You're going to be allied with your stepmom. Yeah. Forget Dad.
Sam was a very compassionate person as well. At church camp one summer, he took a dare, and the dare was for him to raise $10,000 for, water wells in Africa. Right. And he did it, you know.
That's a lot of money.
It was impressive. Yeah, he was, junior high.
How do you do that?
Car washes and, just donations, and he won $500 in a hometown heroes contest. Just these sort of things. So, he did pet rescue, and he went on some mission trips with us. He was a very compassionate guy. He had a skill he could see people not by maybe the way the world sees them, but the way that Christ sees them. And so he could be friends with just about anybody. It didn't matter what your social, economic status or what you look like. And that was a really great trait of his.
Wow. $10,000 to a junior high student. That's like $1 billion to me. I mean,
Right.
It was a lot.
it seems impossible.
$10,000 was a lot of money back then.
It was a challenge when the way it was framed was open one of these envelopes. Whatever it says, you have to do it. And it could say, go to Africa and be a missionary.
Yeah.
But Sam took an envelope and opened it, and it said, raise $10,000 for a well in a remote village.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, I opened the envelope. I've got to do it. He was a man of his word.
Yeah.
Even at that point.
That's
right?
great.
Even as a young man.
Yeah. So much, the same skills that go into being a pilot. You have to have all that determination. You got to be in it for the long haul, right? You can't just decide I'm going to be a pilot next week. It takes a long time to build your hours.
Right.
And so he did. So he had to build about 1,500 hours?
1,500 hours to make it to the airline. And
to get on with the regional, right? So he gets hired by PSA.
PSA.
All right. Talk to us about that journey.
He loved that job at PSA. For you and I, when we were his age, the journey was a lot of paying dues. But his timing was very good. And so he was able to make a real living.
Right.
His first year, he was on reserve almost the whole year, but he lived in base.
Right.
And so it was a win-win for him.
Yeah.
If he got a flight, yay, I get to go fly a CRJ. And if he didn't get a flight, okay, yeah, I get to sit home and play video games. So, he loved it. And he was very
Except
eager.
for hot reserve at the airport.
Hot reserve is not that much fun. But he loved working at PSA, and, he was looking forward. He was just the next bid for making captain. He had 964 hours of 121 time, I think it was. 966. It was in the 900s. So he would have made captain on the next bid, and, he was very interested in what makes a good captain. How do I do this and do it right? And so, we had a lot of those conversations. And
so, as a matter of fact, when you talk about he was interested in how to do it right, that was a story that a line check airman we met told us. He said, I flew with Sam. I wasn't doing a check for him. I just happened to be paired with him. So he said, a lot of times I'll fly with FOs and they will say to me, what's the trick to getting the captain upgrade? What do I need to do to pass that? Right. Sam's question to him was, how do I become the best captain I can be?
Yep.
And he said, that right there, I can't teach that. It's that attitude. You're concerned with doing the job well,
right,
and achieving at the level of not just a captain, but a good captain, right. One who's doing good crew management, one who has good aviation skills. And so he very aggressively sought feedback like that from more senior captains with whom he flew. That was a theme we heard.
As you know, it's a lot more than a check ride, right?
Yeah.
And Sam hated check rides, so he's had his final check ride. He and I were going to fly together again, but we're not going to need a CRJ to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
I hear you. Well, it sounds like he was very determined and had the bigger picture in mind with a lot of things. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He had big aspirations. He wanted to fly international wide body.
Yeah.
He loved to travel.
Highly recommend it.
Right.
He loved to travel. And he said, that I'm going to be able to bid a line. That's going to be the most conducive to my work-life balance. But also, I'll get to fly international and I'll get to fly really big aircraft, which was one thing that he often would tease his father about. That's another one of my favorite memories.
Yeah.
Being with him in an Uber, and he kept telling the driver, my dad and I are both pilots, but I fly the bigger jet.
Ah.
He was proud of that.
Very proud of that.
He was proud of that.
Sure. You guys are competitive then,
right.
for that, right?
Yeah, a little bit, but, it's kind of been fun. But, also, he was engaged to be married, and we were very much looking forward to seeing where that went and what family that they would put together. Mm-hmm. And the very day of this accident, Sheri was out looking at venues for that wedding. And
Mm.
so when I was in Teterboro when the accident happened, because I was out on a trip and I saw in the news that there'd been an accident. And so my natural inclination is to talk to Sam about it. And so I'm texting him and he's not answering my text, which is not normal
Mm.
unless he's flying. Of course,
Mhm.
you know, Sterile Cockpit, we're not going to
Correct.
text in flight, but it was later in the evening. And so I called Sheri and I said, hey, do you know where Sam is? And she said, well, he's on a trip. And I go, I know he's on a trip, but do you know what routes he's flying?
Guys.
And she said, well, I don't know. And she started to text his fiance and tell a little.
Yeah. So I had FaceTime with Lydia earlier in the day and showed her the venue and said, this is a beautiful venue. Savannah is where we live is turning into quite a destination for
Mhm.
destination weddings. So I pushed her that day. I said, if you guys want this venue, we've got to put a deposit down quickly. So when I started texting her that night, she thought it was about the venue. And I said, well, where is Sam? And she said, well, you know, he's on a trip. He's going to end the day in Columbia. He'll be home tomorrow and we'll get back to you. And I said, no, honey, is he flying into DCA? And the phone rang immediately.
Mm.
So I brought her into a three-way call with the two of us. And I had already looked up on the American app and I knew that that flight originated in Wichita. And I said to her, honey, was he flying into DC? And she said, I spoke to him right before he left Wichita. And we knew.
Guys.
It was a painful realization of a moment. It was so very hard, but and so of course I was supposed to fly the next day on, and you know, I wasn't 100% sure that Sam was on this flight yet. And American, they've treated us very well, but they were a little bit slow to get their emergency action, emergency response plan going and working with us. And so I called the company that I worked for and I said, hey, I'm not going to be able to fly tomorrow. And the chief pilot, who I had never met, he called me just moments later and said, what do we need? And I said, I got to get to DC. He said, I'm sending you a car and a driver. And I said, he said, where's your family? I said, they're in Savannah. He said, I'm sending a plane to pick them up. They sent a plane to pick my family up.
Right.
And then when I got to DC and I went to the American Crisis Center, they couldn't tell me anything. They wouldn't even tell me if Sam was on the flight. But I knew at this point, you know, I'd been praying the whole way down there that maybe there's a survivor. Maybe there is, you know. But my company provided for us cars and drivers, a care team, people to help us interact with the NTSB, the coroner, the media. There were so many things to deal with that you're not prepared for, you've never seen. And I mean, and lucky, I mean, I will tell you, we're sitting in the NTSB brief the first day. The first guy that get up to brief is the fire chief. And he gets up in front of everybody and he says, it was a gruesome scene. Body parts spread all over the ice. Nothing prepares you for that.
Yeah.
Nothing prepares you for that. And luckily we had people to lean on. You know, the Red Cross was there, but it was very difficult. And in that meeting is where I realized that out of those several hundred people in that room, only myself and the NTSB even knew what like Class B airspace was and what the helicopter routes would look like. And so I quickly kind of became the technical question guy for the passengers' families and for the rest of the crew's families about maybe what had happened. And I had a pretty good idea what happened right out of, you know, on day one. And I had to always say, we got to wait for the NTSB, but here's what I think. And just about everything that I thought was true on that night turned out to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. So you guys are just, this is, my heart's breaking right now. You're going through normal life. You're setting up a wedding and everybody's excited about wedding venues and plans. And you're texting back and forth and Sam's not responding. And then you said the phone rang. Who was it that called? Was that the confirmation that it was Sam's flight?
No, we never got that confirmation. There was some kind of mix-up with the emergency contact he had entered into the corporate systems.
Okay.
So we were notified really by a DC police officer.
The coroner called me and told me that they had Sam before American Airlines told me that Sam was the first officer on that flight.
But I will say that I had seen a photograph from the crew scheduling app.
Yeah.
So we knew.
We knew
at
it
that point.
before that point, but
And you guys probably knew it here, right?
We did.
Yeah.
We did. I mean, getting it from the corner was bad because, you just hope that maybe there's a survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was pretty much apparent by morning time that there was going to be no survivors, but it's still hard to hear.
All right. I don't want to try to imagine for you, but the suddenness of all of this, is that the hardest part to deal with, or what's
sure. Like, I have lost my parents and siblings and friends in aviation accidents, and this is very different. Right. It was very sudden, and also it was very preventable. This accident didn't have to happen. And as you know, aviation has become safer and safer and safer over the years. But this hole in the safety system was there, and nobody was trying to fix it.
Right. Okay, so you said this was preventable. What's the hole? So
you know about the Swiss cheese model, right? So hundreds of mistakes were made that night.
Yes.
Literally hundreds. And the NTSB, rightly so, focused on the system errors more than the individual errors. So I immediately could see where the mistakes were made in the helicopter.
Okay.
And I could immediately see where the mistakes were made in ATC. And I knew instinctively when I flew those routes that you didn't fly down Route 4 if somebody was on approach to 33. But that information had been lost somewhere. Mm-hmm. And the use of visual separation when it's inappropriate, that had been lost somewhere. And as technology has evolved, we have a technology called ADS-B, and we have ADS-B out, ADS-B in. Almost everybody has to use ADS-B out in congested airspace, Class B, C, and by law. The Army, of course, had an exemption. They didn't need to use it if it was a matter of national security. Well, this was a check ride,
right?
Not a matter of national security.
Right.
Everybody knows where Route 4 is. It's published. So you're not keeping any secrets by where you're flying down Route 4. Now, in this case, it wouldn't really have mattered if they were transmitting ADS-B out. Why? Because the recommendations from the NTSB started going back to 2008 that all aircraft that operate in this airspace should have ADS-B in had never been enacted. See, this is the great thing about the NTSB is they come up with these great recommendations. The terrible thing is there is no requirement for anybody to follow through and make those recommendations the law.
Yeah, and that just I've harped on that on this channel a lot. Why in the world does the FAA not have to institute everything the NTSB says, or at least within reason?
Right.
It's just inconceivable in my mind that the Swiss cheese model, right? You're talking about lining up all the holes in the Swiss cheese all lined up that night, because it's never any one thing that causes an incident.
Right.
It's a whole series of events. So now, in your background, because the audience is listening, going, "Wow, Tim really knows a lot about this, right?" You were a Black Hawk pilot.
That's correct. I spent 20 years in the U.S. Army flying Black Hawks. I was a Black Hawk maintenance test pilot, and for 4 years I was stationed at Fort Eustis, and we would fly a TRADOC commander back and forth to the Pentagon. I flew into the Pentagon 2 or 3 days a week for 4 years straight. So I flew this Route 4, literally hundreds of times, and I knew that route very, very well. You have to be at or below 200 feet.
Right.
Always, if somebody was on approach to tree, I never passed Haynes Point. Haynes Point is a point about halfway down the runway, and it's where the rivers come together. And so what I normally would do if somebody was on approach to 3-3, a Black Hawk can hover. So I would slow to about 20 knots rather than actually holding it at Haynes Point. And then when the aircraft went by, the air traffic controller would tell me to continue on, and then I would go on through. I don't believe that there's any way that this crew actually understood there was an aircraft on approach to 3-3. And even though they were told several times, there was confirmation bias in the cockpit.
Right.
There was transmissions being stepped on, and so they may have not heard completely and understood there was aircraft to 3-3. The senior instructor pilot from that unit testified before the NTSB that when he did visual separation, it didn't really matter if they had the aircraft in sight or not. He thought, I'm on one side of the river and they're on the other. And this was just not accurate.
Right.
Also, the unit had this crazy idea that if you're on the helicopter route, that kept you safe from airplanes. And we knew that to be not the case. And so we always, put separation between us and all aircraft on approach. Now, to be fair, when I was flying those routes, it was before 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
After 9/11, the helicopter routes changed almost to zero, but the approach paths into DC changed. Where I used to shoot an ILS, now it's an LDA and it's offset. And so, the patterns are a little different, the way they land, and also the pad at the Pentagon has moved from one side of the Pentagon to the other because now there's a 9/11 memorial where the helicopter pad used to be. So those are very few changes, but for the most part, exactly the same. And so right from the get-go, I could see where the problems that the Army aviators had. And
Can I interject
Go ahead.
one thing? I do want to mention that we know the crew families from the helicopter. We've met all of them, and my heart breaks for them. That crew has been vilified unfairly because they were set up to fail.
Right.
The young woman who was flying that night was getting the bare minimums to remain current. That was a disservice to her.
that much is true. The Army aviation has had a tough time, and their accident rate was increasing. And it's because the amount of experience. When I was an Army aviator, even a young Army aviator, we got 200 or 300 hours in peacetime, 700 or 800 hours a year in wartime. And currently they're just getting what we call ATP minimums. Yep. And so they would be getting, depending if they're FAC 1 or FAC 2, I think 36 or 48 hours, which is not enough to really be good at what you're doing. And flying night vision goggles at 200 feet in an urban environment, that's graduate level flying.
Right.
You have to have your head on a swivel constantly. You have to be looking under the goggles. There's things you can't see through the goggles you can see with the naked eye. So you either have to look at them underneath them constantly, or you got to click them up every once in a while. You can't see position lights. There's a lot you can't see. When you look from a distance, when they called for visual separation, they were 6.5 miles away. When you look through night vision goggles from 6.5 miles away, all you're going to see is landing lights as dots. You cannot tell. There is no way you can tell which one's over Wilson Bridge, which one's a 747, and which one's a CRJ.
Yeah. And there's no color.
There's no color, and there's no depth perception.
Yep.
And so you have to make up for that. And in order to make up for that, you have to be highly skilled and highly experienced. You have to constantly move your head. You have to look under them, constantly move your head, look under them. And that's how I would fly those routes. Now, when I flew those routes, I flew them unaided. But if I was going to fly that route with the NVGs on, that's how I would do it. The other thing is, requesting visual separation, as you know, is nowhere in the Airman's Information Manual. That's not something that I knew in my 40 plus years of flying that any pilot would ever do, and that had become the standard.
Yep. We're
just going to ask for visual separation because it's going to make it easier for us to get through this airspace, and we got to go back and relook. Now, the good thing is the administrator, when we met with Secretary Duffy, we asked him for 4 things. Mm-hmm. And one of the things is, as you know, regulation in aviation has always been written in blood.
Right.
One of the 4 things we asked him to do is stop writing aviation regulation in blood, start writing it with data.
Yep.
We have tons and tons and tons of data. We have an ASIAS database. When they queued that database, we saw 15,000 close proximity events in 3 years. 3 years, 15,000. 85 near misses were like evasive maneuver kind of near misses.
Those are crazy numbers, by the
way.
Right.
And so you have those kind of numbers, but nobody's going in there saying, okay, what does this mean?
Right.
How do we change things? Okay, but finally, after the accident, when we asked Secretary Duffy to make that happen, he tasked the FAA to make that happen. And one of the things that they did was they looked at the data and they said, you know what? No more visual separation in Class B airspace, Class BC, and I think Tersus as well. And so, this is actually one of the few victories we've had since the accident to get things improved.
Yeah, that is one, and that's a contract. It's a verbal contract between the air traffic controller and whatever aircraft they're working.
Right.
So they might offer it up. They said, do you have traffic in sight? And they'll say, yeah, we've got the traffic in sight. Maintain visual separation. Okay, that's one form. I think Pat 25 that night asked for, can we have our visual separation? They said, yeah. They said they've got the traffic in sight, so they requested. But either way, it becomes kind of now the air traffic controller's off to the next thing.
Right.
Right.
So when you listen to the tapes, you can hear that the Pat 25 was kind of pre-programmed to say, traffic in sight requests visual separation. Traffic in sight requests visual separation.
Yeah,
it was the norm with that
right
unit.
about that.
He never had the traffic in sight. There's no doubt in my mind that he ever had the traffic in sight, but he thought he did. Right. There was lots of aircraft lined up for runway 1, and he could have been looking at any one of those and thinking that was the aircraft. And because I don't think he ever understood there was an aircraft circling the tree. The pilot that was flying had a very difficult check ride to that point. And as pilots, what happens to us a lot of times when things aren't going our way is we kind of have a hard time processing, and we get behind the airplane or the helicopter in this case. And I believe this is some of what was going on, because the instructor pilot was saying, hey, we need to go farther to the left. And the pilot flying was saying, okay, but wasn't actually making any movements on the controls. The Black Hawk was 100% straight and level at impact for like 7 seconds. No inputs. They didn't make any verbal announcement that they're about to have a problem. So they did not know they were going to hit. And so one of the primary things you do when you fly night vision goggles is one person has to be outside the aircraft at all times and moving their head. You can't, if you looked at what the NTSB showed, that would be if you had your head still. If your head is still, you can only see 40 degrees field of view, and that's just too small a field of view.
So was the instructor that night not on night vision goggles?
They were both on night vision goggles.
Okay.
And of course, the other thing,
that's a formula right there.
Yeah. So the other thing that was really disturbing to us when we saw the NTSB hearings was that the senior instructor pilot testified that they often just put their iPad in the door. So the problem with technology is you have to adapt it in order for it to work. So if they had access to a Stratus device, it's still up in the air whether they had it with them or not. But whether they had it with them or not, they weren't using it. And so what is a Stratus device? It is a little receiver that will give ADS-B in information onto your iPad. And so they would have seen exactly where that CRJ was, and it would turn red if it was given a collision warning. And so they would have went, uh-oh, we're in the wrong spot, and hopefully banked left, and none of this, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But years ago, there was a guy, and he was spot on with his training, and it was called the Children of the Magenta Line. And a lot of people didn't understand that training, that maybe weren't actually in the training, and they said, I don't want to be a child of the Magenta Line. I'm not going to adopt technology. I'm going to do things like put my iPad in the door and memorize.
Yeah, let me explain what the Magenta Line is. So as an airline pilot, I've got a screen in front of me. It's not the old round dials. It's a screen in front of me, and the track I'm following, the course, like the highway in front of me, is magenta. It's pink or pink purple. And you just kind of follow the Magenta Line. It's going to take you to wherever you've pre-programmed it to take you. Well, you can become dependent on just following the Magenta Line and not have any situational awareness of actually where you are at the time. So that's the Children of the Magenta Line is, we just follow the line and we don't ask any questions. And of course, stay on the autopilot. Well, of course, neither aircraft on that night was on the autopilot. So the crew of the CRJ was doing a circling maneuver, and they had planned on landing runway 1. Mhm.
They were asked to circle, and it's when you read the transcript, it's heartbreaking because Jonathan, the captain, he didn't really want to circle, and he said,
Mm.
"I don't want to, but do we have the numbers?" And Sam says, "I can just tell them," and I imagine he meant just tell them no. And Sam says, "But do we have the number?" Or Jonathan says, "But do we have the numbers?" And Sam says, "Yes, we do have the numbers to do it." And he goes, "Well, if we have the numbers, we should do it." He executed a flawless circle maneuver right up until he pulled near full-scale deflection. He was exactly on glide path, exactly lined up with the runway. They did the circle maneuver very, very well. But had they just decided not to do it, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It was well within their rights to do it, and it was a good maneuver had the helicopter not been where it was. You got to remember, they could only hear one part of the conversation between air traffic control and the helicopter, and all they knew was there's somebody out there maintaining visual separation from a CRJ. And if I'm the CRJ pilot, I am thinking that other person's taking responsibility to miss me. And they're going to fly around me. They're going to fly behind me. They're going to hold at Haynes Point. They're going to do something other than be in my flight path.
Yeah. Well, the fact that they were on two different frequencies, not listening to each other, that's another piece of the Swiss cheese model.
Right.
It is.
They got lined up that night, and something that would be rather easy to fix, I would think. So let's talk about you guys in the future now, and what because now our audience knows that you're a pilot and you've got Black Hawk experience. You're flying you're flying professionally now. But you've got an extensive background as well, and you're not just parents of the first officer who passed. You guys have got kind of a bold resume. Sheri, tell us a little bit about your portfolio.
So I've spent 30 years in IT, implementing systems, 15 years of those in aviation, across the whole life cycle of aircraft manufacturing, maintenance, monitoring of flight ops and things like that. So Tim and I did have a realization very early on. We're uniquely placed.
Right.
We know more than most families would know. And we felt that was a bit of a call in our lives to speak up. We were compelled to speak up. So very early on, we found ourselves on Capitol Hill through some beautiful and, in our mind, preordained relationships we had that helped open doors for us. And because we did have that aviation background, we had a unique voice to be able to speak to different legislators. So we have been able to interact and help really provide quite a bit of input for the Rotor Act on the Senate side of the House. And we were very happy with that bill. Of course, it came out before the NTSB final recommendations, but there were some things, like Tim said, that were fairly obvious and also spoke to long-term NTSB recommendations. So the ADSBN that Tim mentioned earlier, that would provide not only better, more robust alerting of a collision avoidance in cockpits, it would also give pilots, with the full implementation, better situational awareness. They would be able to see traffic around them.
Right.
So if the Black Hawk had not been operating their exemption to broadcast ADSB out, Sam and John in the CRJ would have been able to see what the implementation that we are advocating, what is in the Rotor Act, what the NTSB recommended is right there in the pilot line of sight, right on the cockpit display. So that would have given them the ability to realize, oh, the aircraft that we think has visual separation and is avoiding us may not have us in sight.
Right.
So it would have given them, according to the NTSB in a simulation, 40 additional seconds. That would have been the information they needed to say, we've got to pull up, we've got to do a go round.
Right.
We can't continue on this approach.
So you guys both have an extensive background in aviation, so that puts you on a different level, especially with policymakers. So I think a lot of times the people in DC, they might be on committees, but they don't know all the nuts and bolts of how the system works exactly, and they're going to depend on you two or people like me and the two of you to kind of give them the information on how it works on a daily basis. So you mentioned the Rotor Act. Where's the Rotor Act right now? And there's another one, right? The Alert Act.
Right.
Let's talk about those two for a minute.
So the Rotor Act, as I mentioned, it passed under unanimous consent
In the Senate.
in the Senate. Unanimous, guys.
Yep. Yep.
In this
Take
environment.
Take
unanimous.
that in. Unanimous in the
Right.
Senate, right?
So that was very heartening for us. We were very encouraged because we know aviation safety, this is not a partisan issue.
Correct.
So we were very excited about that, and we thought, okay, next step, now we're going to go to the House. On the House side, there was a bit of a different perception. The chairman and the ranking member of the Transportation Committee, Transportation Infrastructure Committee, wanted to craft a bill that was responsive to all of the NTSB recommendations. They wanted a comprehensive safety bill.
Okay.
So they held until January. On January 27th, the NTSB held their final board meeting, released the final report. There were 50 recommendations. So the Alert Act is responsive to all 50 of those.
Okay.
However, we feel like it's weaker on the ADSB, on that additional the situational awareness or cockpit display of that
The one
traffic
main
information.
thing you would hope that
Right.
they'd
Well,
include,
Correct.
right? Yeah.
Because
And-
the ADSBN can augment collision avoidance technology, but collision avoidance is a line of last defense.
Yeah.
We don't want it to get to that point. We want to really build upon these multiple layers of safety. And one of the layers that's blatantly missing right now, glaringly obvious to those of us who are not pilots, unlike you guys, is why don't the pilots have the ability to see everything around them?
Good
I
question.
use Waze or Google Maps in my car,
right.
and I can see all the traffic around me. I can see when it's building. I can see when there's an accident or a road is closed.
Right. In my Tesla, I see every car around me on the screen right in front of me all the time.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things we've really been advocating for. Rotor does that very well.
If
Alert does a lot of additional
Right.
stuff too. So we would like to see the two of those merge together.
Okay.
Right. So, if you look at the current technology, which is TCAS, so what let us down on TCAS that night? So TCAS doesn't use ADSB information. It's commonly misconcepted, and I misunderstood TCAS until this accident, and I got to study it. TCAS uses Mode S, right? So it's saying it's sending out a signal to another aircraft, and it gets a signal back from the other aircraft, and based on what direction that signal came from and how long it took to come back, that's where it plots. And so it's not that accurate. When a CRJ is in the landing configuration, the antennas are near the back, the information is not that accurate. I recently was flying an approach to a smaller airport. The traffic was called to me on the left side. It showed up on my TCAS on the right side.
Yeah.
I could clearly see it. I knew it was there.
Yep.
It was
Yeah, I know
showing
what
up
you're
over
talking
here.
about, right, yeah.
And so, it's a diamond, and it doesn't have direction. So you know if you watch it long enough which way it's moving.
Right.
But you don't. But now if you look at the display of ADSBN, you have the aircraft are represented by an arrow, and so you could see which direction it's in, how fast is it going, how long before our paths are going to cross, and you also have background information like if you have synthetic vision, where is it? Is it on the river or is it over the land? And so that gives you a tremendous amount of information. As you know, also, TCAS will not give you a resolution advisory. A resolution advisory is when you would disconnect the autopilot and make a maneuver to avoid a collision. It doesn't give you that resolution advisory below 900 feet.
Right.
So ACAS X is the next generation, and that's going to use ADSBN information, and so it will be available much lower. We don't know how low yet, but when the MOPS comes out, which is how they set the standard for that, we'll know exactly what they'll be able to do.
And when Tim mentions that is one of the provisions in the Alert Act that the FAA will push forward with. There is a MOPS already for ACAS within the fixed-wing aircraft.
Yep.
There's a MOPS for a cockpit display of the traffic information, that other layer that we want to see.
Right.
There is not performance standard, a MOPS defined yet for a rotary version. It may surprise you, and I'm not sure you're aware, those rotary aircraft do not have collision avoidance systems in them.
Yeah,
The only-
I knew that.
The
Yeah.
only collision avoidance system that is in any Blackhawk would be the iPad.
Right.
And if you're not, if that's in the door, it's not going to work.
Right.
Not gonna do you any good sitting there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the Alert Act calls to plug all those holes, and those are necessary too.
Right.
You know,
And-
the Swiss cheese model starts having smaller and smaller holes in it.
Yep.
Right.
And as is typical with Washington, D.C., something starts out with gangbusters, and then it slows down.
Right.
The farther you get away from the actual incident, the less push it has down the road.
Right.
So you got now these two, Rotor Act and the Alert Act, and they're kind of, have they stalled, would you say? And what I'm getting at
A
is, what
bit.
can our audience do, our viewers, to help that process move along? Because we need to get some common sense and some good legislation put in place to make air traffic safer.
Absolutely.
Right. So what can they do?
I would encourage everyone to reach out to your elected officials. You can go to house.gov and senate.gov to find out who your members of Congress are, along with contact information for calling or emailing their office, and just emphasize to them, this is still important to the American people.
It is.
Even though it's languishing, because like you mentioned to us in an earlier conversation, you've spoken to some other members of Congress, and you know they have so many competing priorities.
They do.
There are a lot of bills
Yeah.
that come before them for consideration.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of detail that they need to consume
Yeah.
with the assistance of their staffs. This is something, though, that we can't lose sight of the importance.
Right.
This is critically important because our perspective, and I know it's the perspective of anyone who works in any kind of industrial safety, aviation safety, is we can't remain silent about this, because if there's one more casualty, if there's one more fatality,
Right.
we have no plausible deniability.
Yeah.
We know what needs to be done to prevent that, and it's not
Right.
being implemented.
This is a moral mandate. The NTSB first suggested that we needed to have ADS-B in all aircraft in 2008. When that went to rulemaking, those that were in charge weren't able to figure out how to make it happen and make everybody, they had too many cooks in the pot.
Yep.
And they weren't able to make everybody come to one conclusion. And so they said, we're not going to do it. And so, 67 people would be alive today if they had done their job
Right.
And
the first time.
potentially a lot more.
Yes.
Right.
If we look back at the NTSB, at information about accidents that were due to
Yeah.
loss of separation, mid-air collision, et cetera, from 2008 to 2026, there are probably more than 67 lives lost.
Most of them are in general aviation
Yeah.
and not in airlines. Airlines are, to make the flying public understand, airlines are exponentially safer than any other mode of transportation. But when one happens, it's dramatic,
Mm-hmm.
and it's you would very rarely get a TCAS RA between two airliners. Maybe if you're doing parallel approaches, it can happen sometimes, but it's usually a helicopter or a small aircraft that gets into the mix that would cause problems like that.
Yeah. What I appreciate about you guys is you're not just grieving parents. You are, but you've taken that kind of divine appointment, if you will, for lack of a better expression, that moment in your life, and turn that into a calling. And the hope and the prayer is that this is something that nobody else will have to suffer in the future. Right. And obviously there's some legislation that has got started. It was going well, and then it kind of languishes. So you got the Rotor Act, you got the Alert Act. Both of them are kind of competing over there on the House side. And I'm going to encourage our viewers to even if you're not comfortable with it, right? I understand, you got to make a phone call or make a text. You can email, you can text, you can call your elected official and just tell them, hey, look, I'm concerned about the safety of our airways. And where is the Rotor Act today? Or where is the Alert Act? And say, I'd like a report on that. Let me know. Remember, they work for you, right? That's really important. They work for you. And so all of us have this in common. We all get on an airplane at one point or another, or even if you don't get on an airplane, somebody you love and you care about gets on an airplane, right? And we don't want to have that sudden call at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night or the next morning confirming, you know, what we already know in here is that Samuel's not answering his phone, and this is going to be bad because your life has changed. The direction and the trajectory of your life has changed forever, really.
Absolutely.
It's been no coincidences here, and I'll use this prayer card as an example.
Yeah.
When we buried Sam, you know, we had these prayer cards made, and as we went to different legislators, we handed some out. You know, hey, this is what we're fighting for. And on the anniversary of this accident, we were in DC, and there was a lot of ceremonies and memorials and things. Between those, I just happened to be looking through
At the airport.
We
were at DCA when this happened.
I was looking through YouTube, and it was Captain Steve Goes to DC.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm watching that, you know, kind of interested. Hey, he's talking to the same people we've been talking to. And you pulled out my son's prayer card.
Yeah.
One of the legislators had give it to you, and you read the back of it, and it was super powerful. But it wasn't a coincidence.
Right.
And on that same note, we do have a memorial coin that honors Sam and the other victims of Flight 5342, and we'd like to present that to you now.
Yes, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Here, let me show you on the camera here. All right, it's got a beautiful lily on the back. All right, in honor of Samuel Lilley, and that'll go right on my set. So the Captain Steve set's right over there.
Right.
And I've got a coin rack in the back, and we'll put it prominently so everybody can see this. I'm going to put it lily side out.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
so everybody can see the white lily. Thank you for that. That's wonderful. You guys, there's not words. I mean, words are going to fall short with your loss, and with the heartache that comes with losing a son so suddenly. But wow, I'm just in awe of what you all are doing in terms of turning that tragic moment, a big T tragedy, into something that is going to change the life and affect the lives of so many other people, right? That's such a selfish act to do.
Well, you got to understand that it's actually selfish because I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
We didn't want to do it, but we have a moral mandate,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, the Holy Spirit said, you know, you can't do what you want to do. You got to do what I tell you to do.
Right.
And so, you know, being in the spotlight and doing media, that's not, you know, who I am. But for now, there's another mission that has to be accomplished.
I get it. You get thrust into the spotlight, but I'll say it for you. Your selflessness is on display, and I admire both of you for that.
We've had the opportunity beyond legislation to also speak at multiple safety conferences. We will continue to do that. We'll continue to engage with aviation programs at universities. And I really think that's the way to affect change in the industry. If we can't see some legislation pass,
We get the young people.
we convince the young people that they've got to step into every single cockpit with that safety mindset. And we know that there are so many young people who have an expectation of using technology. So we want to provide them all the tools that they need to do their job safely and execute on that mission of bringing passengers home safely to their loved one.
If you're an aviator, it's not just a job.
It's
It's something that you love. If it becomes just a job and you're a pilot, I would recommend you find something else to do.
Right.
If we have time, I'd like to talk about some of the small victories we've had. I said that we met with Secretary Duffy. It was his second day on the job when this accident happened.
Wow.
We met with him shortly after. I asked him for 4 things. I asked him, and I say we asked him really, modernize the national airspace system. Guess what? We got $12.5 billion in a big, beautiful bill, and we're still going forward with that. We asked him to fully staff air traffic control towers. He's working hard on that. It's not easy. It's not easy.
But they're making progress.
Right.
Yeah.
But you can see like the Canadian aircraft accident that happened when one guy was working 2 frequencies, right? You can see if you have more people in the air traffic control, there's less likely to make mistakes.
Correct.
We asked him to stop writing aviation regulation in blood, and we got some victories there.
Yeah.
And the 4th thing we asked him for was to close Route 4 whenever approaches were going on to Tree. Well, he closed Route 4 altogether.
Yeah.
So we got those 4 things, okay? And then the data has really come forward, and they've made a lot of changes to the way helicopters and airplanes interact. And then there's been several notices out to pilots, like in Charleston, South Carolina. There's a notice out that says, hey, even if you're VFR, use their traffic control tower or the radar here, because there's a lot of military in the area and things of this nature that are making aviation safer all the time. And so some of the airlines are coming on board and starting to order their aircraft with ADS-B in already. And so we're making some progress, even though there's still a lot of work to be done, especially in the legislation.
Well, that's well said.
I think one thing too that really strikes us is we haven't met anyone who doesn't agree with us that no matter how safe a system is, it can be safer.
Right.
And we know any system that has humans in it, there can be human error.
Right.
So what can we control there? We can try to train humans, but what we really need to do is make their job easier. Our air traffic controllers have one of the most stressful jobs that there is in aviation. There is a new system that is designed to help make their jobs easier. The SMART system that a lot of your viewers may have seen Administrator Bedford and Secretary Duffy talking about this new system. They announced an award to a vendor named ASI. I was fortunate enough to be with Administrator Bedford about probably 2 months ago, and he took me into a lab, and the ASI team showed me a demo of what they're doing there. I've heard a lot of people say, oh my goodness, this is AI. We've got to be really careful. It can hallucinate. It can give us inaccurate results. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We know that we've got to be careful with technology, but let's put the governance in place and let's start creating systems that take some of the load off of the human beings. No system is going to be safe if we expect human beings to perform flawlessly in order to ensure that safety. So we've got to add that technology layer in there that helps them do their jobs, and then they can focus on the more value-added things. So for example, it's a little bit mind-boggling for me to know that right now, every single day, when aircraft start flying around in the national airspace, there are pre-approved flights for the flight plans that have been logged that are in conflict with each other.
Yep. Right.
So we say to our air traffic controllers at the start of the day, I'm going to give you a package. This is everything that you're going to see coming into your airport today. Oh, by the way, you've got to start out from 6 a.m. this morning deconflicting traffic.
All day long. And it only gets worse.
Right.
It only gets worse.
So let's start the day deconflicted.
Right.
And then we know there are some other kind of shocks to that system. There can be weather. There can be in-flight emergencies. There can be, other types of activity that cause flight paths to need to change.
Yep.
That's where the AI can help us too. It can recommend, but the final determinant should be the human judgment.
Well, that's the beauty of bringing those two worlds together is AI can process the information a lot faster than any human being can, but AI doesn't have wisdom and discernment, maturity, and judgment.
Right.
But when you bring those two together, it's a great combination. And I think Secretary Duffy, I listened to him talk about, this is a year and a half ago almost, talking about redoing the system, that smart system you're talking about now that's being put in place. And he said the old system was like a VW Beetle, right? It just was analog technology to the max. And we're trying to put digital into it. And at some point, you got to get rid of the Beetle altogether.
Right.
And you got to rebuild the whole thing from the ground up, which they're doing. And so people go, they $12.5 billion towards it. Where is it today? Well, it's moving along.
Right.
Right. And you guys are instrumental in helping kind of push that along.
On the FAA website, there is a link that you can follow and you can see here's where improvements have been made already. We've heard a lot about going from copper wire to fiber, et cetera, for the communications.
Yeah.
And we all know Newark had a lot of outages. We've had other airports that have had outages due to failures of that fundamental infrastructure.
Yeah.
Pretty significant progress has been made there already, which that is that foundational layer. You can't put great technology on top of that.
Yeah.
So
You said government and progress is being made already in the same sentence either, but it's
Right.
true.
it is.
We want to give credit where credit's due, right?
We asked
Absolutely.
Secretary Duffy to move at the speed of business and not the speed of government. And I think that in a lot of ways they're coming through with that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, the general public's going to benefit from all that. You guys, thank you so much for coming. I didn't get to meet Samuel, but I feel like I've gotten to know him a little bit better through the two of you. And so his memory endures. I'm just, hoping that the pilots that come behind him now are as dedicated and as smart and as capable as he was. And I'm sure they will be, but they also have a fighting chance with the technology and the advancements of the system to make sure that an accident like this doesn't ever happen again. So Tim, Sheri, thank you so much for sharing your hearts, sharing your story, and sharing Samuel's story with us.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Yeah, my pleasure.